everybody, hi, it's Becky from PowerToolsWithThread.com. That's my blog. I'm wearing Angela Walters' shirt. So some of you are going to say, Angela Walters said, but no, common misconception. I'm just wearing her shop shirt. I've got 20 years on her or more, and she's a better quilter than I am. So hold on, I gotta open this Diet Coke. When I mentioned the other day that I was going to be doing Lori Holt's Calico Garden quilt, y'all, my inbox blew up, just crazy. So many of you want to join me in this and use your ScanNCut to cut out your fabrics, and you want to use the software to make it with embroidery the way I do. So I thought I would take a minute and maybe answer some of your questions, because if people are emailing me with these questions, then they're not the only one wondering, and you guys want to know all about it. So, okay, the first question. Will the ScanNCut work with my Viking, Pfaff, Janome, whatever you guys are wondering? You've got a ScanNCut, or you're researching about getting one, and you want to know if it's going to work with your embroidery machine. So ScanNCuts do not work with embroidery machines at all. They are their own standalone piece of equipment, with the exception of the ability for certain models of the ScanNCut to talk to the Brother Luminaire XP2 or higher. Okay, or maybe it'll work with the XP1, I'm not sure. Anyway, that is just a communication between those particular models of an embroidery machine and a ScanNCut. But the ScanNCut itself, it's just a cutting machine. It is identical in theory to the Cricut or the Silhouette, except it is a superior machine because it can scan in a paper pattern. If you get an embroidery design, say you get a Kimberbell design, or maybe you got something from Sweet Pea and you wanted to make that design, and it comes with SVG cut files, you can take that SVG file from your laptop and you can upload it to the Brother Canvas if you want to do it wirelessly, and then download it to your ScanNCut if you have wireless capability. Okay, if you don't have wireless capability, then you could save the SVG file to a USB stick and take it to the ScanNCut with USB, and you can cut out your applique that way. Then you would take the embroidery design itself, load it on your machine just like normal, and when you get to the applique part, you would have already had your fabric cut with the ScanNCut. Or upload the SVG file to the Cricut cloud and then cut it with your Cricut, or the Silhouette. Either way, in that respect, it is just a standard cutting machine. Now, what makes the ScanNCut unique in the way I'm doing the applique is that, for instance, on a Lori Holt shape, this is a Lori Holt simple shape, and this is the scanning mat for the Brother Luminaire. Don't get confused with that, okay? So I, on a piece of printer paper, I prefer a Crayola marker or a number 2 pencil. Either one will work. I like the Crayola markers because you get a nice dark line, and if you get any marker on your simple shape, then you can just wash it off. It comes right off, in a soapy sink, or just plain with water. Well, let me back up. What's a simple shape? I keep all of my simple shapes in a Lori Holt binder, and I labeled it Lori Holt Simple Shapes. Let me back up a little bit so you guys can see this a little bit better. Okay. And I have them all in here in plastic little binders, little zipper pouches, okay? And what Lori Holt does in her quilts is she will have you, for her applique quilts, she has these plastic shapes. They're called simple shapes, and they're for all kinds of different quilts. And she will take this simple shape, all right, and you would trace around it on some fabric or on like an interfacing type thing, not stabilizer, an interfacing. And you will then stitch all the way around. You cut 1/4 of an inch away all the way around. So you stitch all the way, and then you cut, and then on the interfacing you make a snip, and then turn the whole thing right side out, and turn the edges with a turning tool and press it flat, and then applique that piece onto the background fabric. That's a lot of work, a lot of work. The way I do it is I will take this simple shape, and I was sampling yesterday morning. I just used this little heart. Can you see the heart on my on my shirt? I use this little heart, and I will draw around the heart on a piece of printer paper. I'll tell you why I was doing this on the scanning mat here in a minute. Okay, so I just draw around it. This is exactly what I did with my chickens. Draw around it and then scan this in to the Brother ScanNCut. And then it will cut this shape. Then the Brother ScanNCut, the file that it creates is not an SVG file. It creates an FCM file format. It's still a vector graphic. Then you would import that FCM file into a piece of software. You can use either BES4 or Simply Applique. Simply Applique is a module inside of BES4 software. Now, BES4 and Simply Applique only work on Windows machines, or it will work on a Mac with Parallels and a Windows OS installed on it. If you don't know what that is, then you don't have a Mac and you don't need to worry about that, okay? But that FCM file, you go File, Import FCM, and I've got a playlist up here that I'll show you. You can click on it and watch all the videos on what I'm doing with this. So you File, Import FCM, and that graphic file, that artwork file, will import into that software, and then click of one button and it will turn it into an applique design. You'll get your placement line, your tack down stitch, and your final blanket, satin, motif, whatever you want stitch. If you have a Mac and you don't have Parallels with a Windows OS, then you can use Embrilliance Stitch Artist 2. In Embrilliance Stitch Artist 2, you can go and import that graphic, that FCM file, and with the click of one button, turn it into an applique design. So you can do this regardless of what kind of computer you're working on. So there's that. So when you save the design, once you have got it all put together, if it's multi-layers, like I had chicken legs with feet, then I had a chicken body on top of that, and I had a wing on top of that. When you've got all that done, you can create a single embroidery design with all of those pieces. So, and it's in the right order so that the feet stitch down first, and then the body, and then the wing, and so on. So that's the benefit of that software, of both of those different pieces of software. And then you just File, Save As, and when you save that stitch file, it will save to every single home embroidery machine brand format. It'll save for a Bernina, a Janome, a Viking, a Pfaff, a Brother, whatever. So even though you started by scanning it into a Brother device, the ScanNCut, the design file that is created from that ScanNCut can be imported into that software, and it will save to every home embroidery machine format. So I wanted to clear that up. So the ScanNCut does not work with embroidery machines, with the exception of the Luminaire. It will work. The process that I am going to do will work with every home embroidery machine, and even some commercial machines, because there are some save formats in that as well. Am I doing the sew along? When I'm doing the Lori Holt sew along, so we leave on the sew and sail cruises on January 20th, and we don't get back until February 5th. Lori Holt is starting the sew along on January 30th while we are out. And so when I get back, if I do not get my hands on the pattern prior to when we leave, then I will do the first two whatever we're doing, I'll do those together when we get back, and I'll get caught up. And then after that, it'll be week to week to week, and we'll get everything all done. So, but each week as we go through this, I will be showing you how I scanned in the tracing. And when I say trace, I'm tracing around the simple shape. I'm not copying any patterns. Okay, guys? People get kind of confused about that. Yeah, I have to purchase the fabric, I purchased the kit, I purchased the simple shapes, so I'm just putting them together a different way. And I love what Lori says. She said that you make your quilt your way, and she doesn't take offense to that at all. And I think that that's just wonderful. So long. A lot of you emailed me and said, oh, you want to do it, and you've got to scan and cut, and you're not sure, you haven't taken it out of the box. You guys, get it out of the box, okay? Plug it in, turn it on, and poke around on it. You're not going to break it. Get familiar with the menus. Pull up my videos where I'm doing this and just poke around. That's all you got to do. Poke around with me. And if you get lost, hit the home button and start all over again, okay? You don't have to cut right away, but it's important for you, just like with your embroidery machine. And then some of you have never taken the embroidery arm out of the little luggage that you got with your embroidery machine combo, your sewing combo, and you really want to do this. I think this is going to be a good plan because while this quilt is very large, everything on it is very simple, and it's just putting all of those blocks together in the end to get the quilt made. All right, so I would encourage you, if you have never used your embroidery arm and you have a combo machine, just like with the ScanNCut, put it on there, turn your machine on, and then poke around on it and just get familiar with it. You don't have to do anything with it at first, and that's important. And once you realize that embroidery machines thread identically to a sewing machine. So if you've been putting thread on your sewing machine for years and years and years, you already know how to thread your embroidery machine because they thread the same. The only difference between the two is that where with the sewing machine, you're moving the fabric yourself under the foot and you're in control of that. And in the embroidery machine, the embroidery arm is moving the fabric for you. So there's a lot more that goes into it, knowing stabilizers for which project and blah, 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 and all of that. But at its core, your embroidery machine is just a sewing machine. It's just moving the fabric for you instead of you moving it. So do you need both? No, you do not. To do what I'm going to be doing on the Lori Holt Calico Garden, you don't. You do need either Simply Applique or BES4. You can get those at brother dealers generally. And I get mine at All Brands, and I know you can go to allbrands.com and they have it and you can get whatever. If you are buying an embroidery machine, generally Brother will offer a, they call it a +1, and they'll have several choices of things that you can get to go along with your machine purchase. Y'all, I don't work for Brother. I'm not a Brother ambassador. This is just my experience, okay? And BES4, I know that All Brands offers BES4 as one of the +1 options. I don't know if all Brother dealers do that. You should call your dealer and find out. So, all right, I don't have a Brother machine. Can I only use BES or Simply Applique if I have a Brother machine? Again, no. You do have to have a Windows operating system on your laptop. The software does not install on your embroidery machine at all. It installs on your laptop or your computer. And then you go in and manipulate designs in the computer, in the software, and then you file save as, and you save it to your home embroidery machine format. So you don't have to have a Brother embroidery machine to do this particular sew along with Calico Garden, okay? It works with all home embroidery machines because it's not on the machine, it's on the computer. All right, so I hope that's clear. It can be confusing, I know, and I'm sorry. And for those of you that are like, I'm not a computer person and I don't know how to do any of this, y'all get a grandchild to install the software on your computer for you, okay? And then you can follow along with me and we'll make the quilt together. And that's pretty easy to do. All right. Becky, can I make this on the Luminaire without doing any kind of software? Yes, you can. So the reason I have the Brother scanning mat for the Luminaire, and the reason I traced around this simple shape, I traced around it, okay, and scanned it in. If you have an XP2, the Luminaire XP2 or later, you can create files with the blanket stitch. That applique stitch that it does, and I will link to a video below on how to, it's not a video, it's an article that was written on how to do it. It goes over the bare bones of how this is done. But basically, you can take this as you scan in a line drawing, and then you save it in the machine, and you're going to need to save it 2 or 3 times depending on how you're going to do this. So I made this from that design. This little blanket stitch. And the reason I say XP2 or later, XP2 has the blanket stitch on it, okay? It's a little wrinkly because I don't have a substrate on the back. I did it the old-fashioned way. Your first design you will save as a straight line stitch, and that's your placement line. And the second design could be a tack down, another straight line stitch. You can copy and paste that, put them in the same spot on the embroidery field, and it would be your tack down line. You would trim around the outside of the fabric, which is exactly what I did here. And then the third version of it, you turn into the applique with the blanket stitch, and then you can stitch that down. So the blanket stitch that is in the Luminaire, that's all it is a blanket stitch. It's not a placement line. And you'll see that when you go to save it as embroidery, and it only comes up, it's 1 stitch. It doesn't have the placement line first, and so on. If that makes no sense and your eyes rolled in the back of your head, I'm sorry. But I will link to that article where you can see how that's done. All right. One of you asked me, what's the difference between SF101 and Pellon's 987F? Okay. And do you need it for this particular quilt? If you're going to satin stitch your applique, then yes, you would need SF101. If you're going to blanket stitch your applique, and this is talking about, this is applicable to the Calico Garden, but it's really any embroidery. And it's a trick that I learned, believe it or not, from Kimberbell. They gave me this idea. SF101, it looks like fabric, but it's got glue bumps on one side, and it's a woven fabric, okay? Hear that? It's woven. It does not stretch at all. This is fabulous if you're going to be doing any embroidery that has a heavy satin stitch on it or a heavy fill, because it is going to prevent that pull compensation tug that occurs. It provides stability for the background fabric. And that's why I used it on all of the wedges for the Designs by Juju Christmas tree skirt, because it provided a solid foundation on the back of that quilting cotton, and I didn't get any puckering at all. You will solve most of your puckering problems if you use SF101 on the back of your embroidery, of your background fabric. It isn't necessary on your applique pieces because it's already on the background fabric. So for a substrate on the applique pieces, I have found, this is just me personally, I have found Heat and Bond Light, not standard, but Heat and Bond Light or Hot Fix adhesive works best to cut on the low tack mat, because those two substrates have kind of a rubberized texture to them, and they will stick better to the mat. That's just what I have found. I have used other substrates like Misty Fuse, and it just didn't hold to the mat, and the fabric shifts everywhere. If you don't have those two and you want to use a lighter substrate on the back of your fabric when you go to cut it, just be sure to put your fabric down with some Scotch tape. Scotch tape is your friend. Don't be afraid to make sure that your fabric stays where it's supposed to, okay? Now on the 987F, It has a loft to it, and it's very stretchy, all directions. It stretches. So it's not a woven fabric. It has glue bumps on one side, and I love this inside of table runners or mug rugs or anything like that. I am going to get it has a nice hand to it. It doesn't make it real stiff. This is not going to change the hand of this is the Pellon's SF101, Shape Flex 101. This will not change the hand of your quilt block either. I probably will be putting this on the back side of all of the quilt blocks for the Lori Holt quilt, probably. I'm not sure. We'll see, okay? I won't be using this in the Lori Holt quilt because once the top is all done, I'm gonna throw it on the long arm with some regular batting in it and quilt it. Probably, I don't know how I'm gonna quilt it. That's another mountain, okay? Let's see, steam or no. So I do not steam my fabrics at all. Many quilters do, and if that works for you, then fine. If you are finding out that your fabrics have a tendency to get wavy or distorted, out of shape, it has been my experience, and I've been sewing for a long time. Any good garment sewist, that's not a word. Any garment sewer will tell you that if you want to force fabric to shape to the human body, you will steam the fire out of it. You can make fabric do just about anything with steam, and that's because you're using moisture to shape the fabric away from its original woven or poly, whatever it is, okay? So it's just my opinion. This is just me talking, you guys. If you get wovens damp with steam, they forget where to go. And when I iron, I only iron back and forth, forward and backwards. I do not iron wovens on a diagonal. So if you are using steam, and if you're ironing on a diagonal at all across a woven fabric, what you are doing is you're distorting the fabric. And when it cools, it stays like that. So to prevent that, I do not use steam when I quilt. I have just had much better success with no steam at all. Now I use Faultless Magic Premium Quilting and Crafting Spray. This is all I use when I quilt. It doesn't have a smell to it like Mary Ellen's Best Press does. And I know some people are sensitive to that scent. It doesn't bother me, but some people are sensitive to it. And so I use this, and this has fabric relaxers in it as well. When I'm ironing or pressing with it, I'm only pressing back and forth, front to back. So I generally do not press on a diagonal or the bias. But when I'm doing this is not water. So, okay. Pre-wash or no. I do not pre-wash my fabrics, but my fabrics come from quality quilt fabric. So generally the manufacturers are making sure that those are very color fast. You can toss them in the wash with some color catchers if you want. The only one that I ever do anything to is if I've got a red and I know it's going to be washed. I've got a quilt that, you know, it was the big flag quilt that we made, and I did a vinegar bath on all of the red on that, and some of the red did bleed out, okay, with a cold water rinse, and then I laid everything flat to dry. I didn't put it in the dryer. But generally, I do not pre-wash my fabrics. If you are buying fabrics not from a quilt store, you may want to go ahead and pre-wash those with some color catchers and make sure, you know, just to confirm and make you feel good that the colors are color fast. Okay. When I do a lot of my quilting, because as I say, there's never enough hours in the day, I will use my multi-needle sometimes, and I get asked all the time, can I do that on a single needle? You absolutely can. You just have to change all your thread colors yourself, that's all. With a single needle, It is set up for a color stop in between every single color to give you an opportunity to change thread colors if you need to. On the multi-needle, it's not set up like that. You have to tell it to stop. So it's just a manual process as opposed to on the single needle that stops after every single one of them. But the stabilizers are the same. The process is pretty much identical. The trimming, if you're going to trim in the hoop, everything is exactly identical. It's just that the multi-needle is set up so it does not automatically stop in between each color stop. All right. Yeah, so I will get caught up as soon as we get back to land and I get home. I think we'll be home on the 5th or the 6th, I'm not sure, so of February. So I will be starting a week late, but I just wanted you guys to know that. So, all right, you guys, that's it. If you've got more questions, rather than emailing me, which you can certainly do, powertoolswiththread@outlook.com. I've got my email address below. You'd be surprised. I bet a lot of other people are wondering as well. So don't hesitate to leave a comment below the video and ask a question then. I will answer as many as I can, okay? All right, you guys, that's it. You guys go sew something. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.